Yogah Karmasu Kaushalam.
Hello friends, this is Professor Neelam Panchal from Gujarat University and I welcome you all in this session on Theories of Management Part 2. Friends, in the previous session of the Theories of Management Part 1, we have tried to look into different theories. In this session, we are going to examine how management theories concerning proper management practices has evolved in the modern times and look at the central concerns that have guided its development. We are also going to consider behavioral management theories developed both before and after the Second World War, which focuses on how managers should lead and control their workforces to increase the performance. Then we will see the management science theory which was developed during World War II and which has become increasingly important since researchers have developed rigorous analytical and quantitative techniques to help the managers measure and control organizational performance. So, let me explain you the objectives of the session. The objectives of the sessions are to make you understand different theories of management, try to trace the history of management, find out the contributions made by important management thinkers, to compare the contributions of various management thinkers and to analyze the nature and process of the theories. The theories that have evolved throughout the history of the humankind includes number 1, behavioral management theory. Friends, let us try to understand the behavioral management theory. The behavioral management theorists writing in the first half of the 20th century all espoused a theme that focused on how managers should personally behave to motivate the employees and encourage them to perform at high levels and be committed to the achievement of organizational goals. The management insight indicates how employees can become demoralized when managers do not treat their employees properly. The work of Mary Parker Follett, let us try to look into. Friends, if F.W. Taylor is the father of the management, then Mary Parker Follett is the mother. Much of her writing about the management and the ways managers should behave towards the workers was a response to her concern that Taylor was ignoring the human side of the organization. Mary stated that management often overlooks the multitude of the ways in which employees can contribute to the organization. When managers allow them to participate and exercise initiative in daily lives. Taylor, for example, relied on time and motion experts to analyze the workers' job for them. Follett argued that workers should be involved in the job analysis and the managers should permit them to participate in the work development process. Follett proposed that authority should go with knowledge, whether it is upline or down. If workers have necessary knowledge, then workers rather than the managers should be in control of the work process and the managers should behave as coaches and the facilitators, not as monitors and supervisors. Follett anticipated the current interest in the self-employed teams and the empowerment. She also acknowledged the importance of having managers in different departments communicate directly with each other to speed the decision making. She advocated that she called cross-functioning members of the different departments working together in a cross-departmental teams to accomplish projects, an approach that is increasingly utilized today. Fayol also mentioned expertise and knowledge as the important sources of the manager's authority. But Follett continued to be the most important. She proposed that the knowledge and expertise and not the manager's formal authority deriving from their position in the hierarchy should decide who would lead at any moment. She believed, as do many management theories today, that the power is fluid and should flow to the person who can best help the organization achieve its goal. Follett took a horizontal view of the power and authority in contrast to the Fayol, who saw the formal line of authority and a vertical chain of command as being the most essential to the effective management. Follett's behavioral approach to the management was extremely radical for its time. Now, let us try to look into Hawthorne studies and human relations. Friends, Follett's work was unappreciated by some managers and researchers until quite recently. Instead, researchers continued to follow in the footsteps of Taylor and the Gilbreth. One focus was on how efficiency could be increased through enhancing various aspects of the work setting, such as job specialization or the type of tools employed by the workers. The Hawthorne works of the Western Electric Company conducted a series of studies in 1924 to 1932. The Hawthorne studies, now known as the Hawthorne studies, began as an attempt to investigate the characteristic of the work setting, specifically the level of lighting or illumination which affect worker fatigue and performance. The researchers conducted an experiment in which they observed worker productivity at various levels of illumination. The experiment achieved some unexpected results. The researchers concluded that if they raised or lowered the level of illumination, productivity increased. In fact, productivity began to decline only when the level of illumination decreased to the level of moonlight, a level at which presumably the workers could no longer see well enough to perform their task efficiently. So, the researchers discovered these findings and invited a Harvard psychologist, Elton Mayo, to help them. Furthermore, it was discovered that many other factors also influence worker behavior, and it was not clear that what was causing the Hawthorne's workers' behavior. However, the Hawthorne effect, which became known as the Hawthorne effect, seemed to suggest that the workers' attitude toward their managers affect the level of workers' performance. In particular, the significance was that a manager's behavior or a leadership approach can affect the performance. These findings led many researchers to focus their attention on the managerial behavior and leadership. If supervisors could be trained to behave in ways that would encourage cooperative behavior from their supervisors, then productivity could be increased. From this viewpoint, the human relations movement, which advocates that supervisors be trained to manage subordinates in ways that encourage their cooperation and increase their productivity, appeared. So, the importance of the behavioral or human relations training became even more evident to its supporters after another series of experiments, the bank wiring room experiments. So, in a study of the workers making telephone switching equipment, researchers Elton Mayo and Abje Roethlisberger discovered that the workers as a group had deliberately adopted a standard of output restriction to safeguard their jobs. Those who violated these informal production norms were subjected to sanctions by other groups. Those who violated group performance norms and performed above the norm were called ret busters, and those who performed below the norm were called chiselers. The experimenters concluded that both the types of workers were threatening the group. Red busters threatened group members because they revealed to managers how fast the work could be done. Chiselers were questioned because they were not doing their part of the work. Workgroup members disciplined both red busters and chiselers to create a speed of work that the workers believed was fair. Thus, a workgroup influence on output can be great as supervisors' influence. Since the workgroup can influence the behavior of its members, some management theorists argue that supervisors should be trained to behave in ways that gain the goodwill and cooperation of the workers so that the supervisors, not the workers, control the level of workgroup performance. The Hawthorne studies demonstrated that the behavior of the managers and the workers in the work environment is as important as the technical aspects of the task as well. And the managers must understand the functioning of the informal organization, the system of behavioral rules and the norms that appears in a group when they attempt to manage or alter the behavior in the organizations. Friends, many studies have found that as time passes, groups often develop elaborate procedures and the norms that bond members together, allowing unified action either to cooperate with the management to raise the performance or to restrict the output and thwart the attainment of the organizational goals. The Hawthorne studies demonstrated the importance of understanding how the feelings, thoughts and behaviors of the work group members and the managers influences performance. It was increasingly clear that the researchers that understand the behavior in the organization is a complex and it is a crucial to increase the performance. Thus, the increasing interest in the organization behavior, the study of the factors that have an impact on how the individuals and the groups respond to and act in the organization is based on these early studies. Now, let us look into theory X and theory Y. Friends, several studies following the Second World War revealed how assumptions about the workers' attitudes and behaviors affect managers' behavior. Douglas MacGregor, perhaps the most influential approach, was developed. He proposed that two different types of assumptions about the work attitudes and behaviors dominate the way managers perceive and affect how they behave in the organizations. MacGregor named these two contrasting set of assumptions theory X and theory Y. Let us understand theory X. According to theory X, the average worker is lazy, dislikes work and will attempt to do as little as possible. Moreover, workers have little ambition and desire to avoid the responsibility. Thus, the manager's task is to counteract workers' natural tendencies to avoid the work. To maintain workers' performance at an elevated level, the manager must supervise them closely and control their behavior by means of the carrot and stick rewards and the punishments. MacGregor says that managers who accept the assumptions of theory X design and shape the work setting to maximize their control over the workers' behavior and minimize workers' control over the duration of work. These managers believe that workers must be able to accomplish what is necessary for the success of the organization, and they focus on developing the rules, SOPs and a well-defined system of the rewards and the punishments to control the behavior. They find it difficult to provide the workers with the ability to solve their own problems because they believe that the workforce does not anticipate nor wants to cooperate. Theory X managers view their role as closely examining the workers to ensure that they contribute to the production process and do not harm the product quality. Henry Ford, who closely supervised and manage his workforce complies with the McGregor's explanation of a manager who holds theory X assumptions. Suppose a manager named David has 8 team members and 5 of them mostly do not complete their task on time and they are not motivated, then he adopted an authoritarian management style explained in theory X, which involved using rewards and punishment to motivate the team members. Now, when the team members completed the task, David gave them rewards, for example, appraisals or the bonuses or anything. However, when they failed to fulfill their responsibilities, the manager punished them with a written warning, pay cut, or even the temporary suspension. Now, let us try to look into theory Y. In contrast to theory X, theory Y poses that the workers are not inherently lazy, do not naturally dislike the work, and if given the opportunity, they will do what is beneficial for the organization. So, according to theory Y, the characteristic of the work setting determine whether the workers consider work to be a source of satisfaction or punishment, and managers do not need to control workers' behavior closely to make them perfect at a high level, because workers will exercise self-control when they are dedicated to organizational goals. So, the implication of theory Y according to McGregor is that the bounds of collaboration in the organizational setting are not limits of the human nature, but of the management's imagination in discovering how to realize the probable represented by its human resources. It is the manager's task to create a work setting that encourages commitment to organizational goals and provides opportunities for the workers to be imaginative and to exercise the initiative and the self-direction. When the managers design the organization to reflect the assumptions about the attitudes and behaviors suggested by theory Y, the characteristics of the organization are quite different from those of organization based on theory X. Managers who believe that workers are motivated to contribute to the organizational objectives can decentralize authority and give more control over the job to workers both as individuals and groups. In these settings, persons and groups are still accountable for the activities, but the manager's role is not to control employees but to provide backing and advice to make sure employees have the resources they need to carry out their jobs and to evaluate them on their ability to help the organization to meet its goal. Henry Fayol's approach to the administration is more closely related to the assumptions of theory Y rather than theory X. Suppose, let's take an example of XYZ. So, let's say Matthew Smith is a manager at Amazon, a tire manufacturing company. He follows theory Y and believes in the idea of decentralization and delegation. Therefore, Matthew gives them more authority and a responsibility if the team members are not motivated. Moreover, he trusts their decisions and helps them understand what they contribute to the organization. Rather than punishing the team members or giving them financial incentives, Matthew explains and enables them to work together with others to come up with a solution. Now, these fulfills the team members' social self-esteem and self-actualization requirements. So, this is theory X and a Y. Now, let us try to understand management science theory. Friends, management science theory is a contemporary approach to the management that focuses on the use of the rigorous quantitative techniques to assist the managers in achieving the maximum utilization of the organizational resources to produce the goods and services. In essence, management science theory is a contemporary extension of the scientific management which was developed by the Taylor, also took at a quantitative approach to measure the worker task mix to raise the efficiency. So, there are many areas of the management science, each of them deals with a specific set of concerns which includes quantitative management utilizes mathematical techniques such as linear and non-linear programming, modeling, simulation, queuing theory and a chaos theory to help the managers decide, for example, how much inventory to hold at different times of the years, where to locate a new factory, and how best to invest an organization's financial capital. Secondly, operations management, which provides the managers with a set of techniques that they can use to analyze any aspect of an organizational production system to increase the efficiency. Thirdly, total quality management, which focuses upon analyzing the organizational input, conversion and output activities to increase the product quality. Fourthly, management information systems that help managers design information systems that provide the information about the events occurring inside the organization as well as in its external environment information that is vital for the effective decision making. All these subfields of the management science provides the tools and the techniques that managers can use to help improve the quality of the decision making and increase the efficiency and the effectiveness. Friends, the next theory is the organizational environment theory. So, an important breakthrough in the history of the management occurred where the researchers went beyond the study of how managers can influence behavior within the organization to consider how managers control the organization's relationship with its outside environment or organizational environment. So, the set of forces and the conditions that operate beyond the organization's boundaries but affect the manager's ability to acquire and utilize the resources. So, the resources in the organizational situation include the raw material and the skilled people that an organization need to produce goods and services, as well as support of the groups including customers who buy the goods and services and provide the organization with the financial resources. One way of deciding the relative success of an organization is to consider how effective its managers are at obtaining the scarce and valuable resources. So, the importance of studying the environment became very clear after the development of the open systems theory and the contingency theory during the 1960s. So, let us try to look into what is the open systems view. Friends, one of the most influential views of how an organization is affected by its external environment was developed by the Daniel Katz, Robert Kahn and James Thompson in the 1960s. Now, these theorists believe that the organization was an open system, a system that takes in resources from its external environment and converts or transforms them into the goods and services that are then sent back to that environment where they are bought by the customers. At an input stage, the organization buys the resources such as raw material, money and the skilled workers to produce the goods and services. Once the organization has collected the necessary resources, the conversation begins. At the conversation stage, the organization's workforce, utilizing proper tools, techniques and machinery, transform the inputs and outputs to the finished goods and services such as cars, hamburgers or flights or Hawaii, utilizing proper equipment. So, friends, at the end of the day, the organization releases finished goods and services to its external environment, where customers purchase and use them to fulfill their needs. So, the money the organization is receiving from the sales of the output allows the organization to purchase more resources so that they can cycle again and again and the next cycle begin well. So, the system just described is said to be open. Why open? Because the organization draws from and interacts with the external environment to survive. In other words, the organization is open to environment. A closed system, however, is a self-contained system and that is not affected by changes that occur in its external environment. Organizations that operate as a closed system which disregard to the external environment and they do not purchase the inputs are likely to experience entropy and the tendency of the system to lose their ability to control itself and thus to dissolve and disintegrate. So, the management theorist can evaluate the activities of most organizations by using the open systems view. Friends, the manufacturing companies like Ford and General Electric, for example, they buy the inputs such as component, parts, skilled and semi-skilled labor and the robots and computer controlled manufacturing equipment. Then at the conversion stage, they use their manufacturing skills to assemble the inputs into outputs of the cars and the computers. So, the competition between the organizations for resources is one of the several major challenges to manage the organizational environment. Researchers using open systems view are also interested in how various parts of the system work together to promote the efficiency and effectiveness in an organization. System theorists like to argue that the parts are more than sum of the whole. They mean that an organization performs at a higher level when its departments work together rather than separately. So, constructive collaboration, the performance gains that result when individuals and departments coordinate their actions is the possible only in an organized system. So, the recent interest in using the teams forming people from different departments reflects systems theorist interest in designing organizational systems to create constructive collaboration and thus increase the efficiency and the effectiveness. Now, let us try to understand the contingency theory. Friends, in the 1916s, Tom Burns and G. M. Stucker in the United Kingdom and Paul Lawrence and J. Lodge in the United States developed contingency theory. The vital message of the contingency theory is that there is no one best way to organize. The organizational structure and the control systems that the managers choose, it depends on are contingent on the characteristic of the exterior environment in which the firms operate. According to contingency theory, the characteristic of the environment affect a firm's ability to gain the resources. To increase the likelihood of gaining access to the resources, managers must allow the firm's department to organize and control their actions in ways most likely to allow them to obtain the resources given the constraints of the circumstances they face. In other words, how managers design the organizational hierarchy, choose a control system and lead and motivate their employees is contingent on the characteristic of an organizational environment. An important characteristic of the external environment is that it affects the overall ability to obtain the resources is the degree to which the environment is changing. So, changes in the organization environment includes changes in the technology, which can lead to the creation of the new products and the result is in the obsolescence of the existing products. So, the entry of the new competitors and unstable economic conditions. Friends, overall, the more quickly the organizational environment is shifting, the greater are the hitches associated with gaining access to the possessions and greater is the manager's need to find out the ways to organize the activities of the people in different departments in order to respond to the environment swiftly and efficiently. The basic idea behind contingency theory is that there is no one optimal approach to design or lead an organization that has been incorporated into the other areas of the management theory such as leadership theories. Now, let us try to understand mechanistic and organic structures. Drawing on the Weber's and Fayol's principles of the organization and management, Burns and Stocker propose two basic ways in which managers can organize and control the organization's activities to respond the characteristics to its external environment. They can utilize a mechanistic structure or an organic structure. So, a mechanic structure typically consists of theory X assumptions and an organic structure typically consists of theory Y assumptions. So, when an environment surrounding an organization is stable, managers tend to choose a mechanistic structure to organize and control the activities and make the employee behavior predictable. In a mechanistic structure, authority is centralized at the top of the management hierarchy, and the vertical hierarchy of the authority is the main means used to control the subordinates' behavior. So, the task and the roles are specified, subordinates are closely supervised, and the emphasis is on strict discipline and order. So, everyone is familiar with his or her place, and there is a place for everyone. A mechanistic structure provides the most efficient way to operate in a stable environment because it allows managers to obtain the inputs at the highest cost, giving an organization the most control over its conversion processes and enabling the most efficient production of the goods and services with the smallest expenditure of the resources. Take an example of the McDonald's restaurants which run with a mechanistic structure. Supervisors make all the important decisions. Employees are closely supervised and follow the well-defined rules and a standard operating procedures. In contrast, when the environment is changing rapidly, it is difficult to obtain access to resources and the managers need to organize their activities in a way that allows them to cooperate, to act quickly to acquire the resources such as new type of inputs to produce new kind of products and to respond effectively to the unexpected. So, in an organic structure, power is centralized to middle and the first line managers to foster them to take the responsibility and act quickly to pursue the scarce resources. Friends, departments here are encouraged to take the cross-departmental or a functional approach, such as in Mary Parker Follett's model, authority rests with the individuals and the departments best positioned to control the current challenges the organization facing. So, in an organic structure, control is much more difficult than it is in a mechanistic structure, and reliance on the shared standards to guide the organizational activities is a greater. Managers in an organic structure can respond more quickly to the changing environment than the managers in a mechanistic structure. However, an organic structure is typically more expensive to operate, so it is only used when the organizational environment is unstable and rapidly changing. So, to ease the global expansion, managers at Philips, for example, they were required to change from a mechanistic to the organic structure, and their experience illustrates the various properties of these structures. Now, after understanding all these theories of management, let me summarize the session. So, in this session, we have examined the evolution of the management theories and the research over the last century. Researchers have described different approaches, and its approaches are to the managerial behavior, including theory X, theory Y, and often the managerial behavior that researchers suggest reflect the context of their own historical era and culture. We have seen the Mary Parker Follett who advocated managerial behavior that did not reflect accepted methods of the managerial behavior at the time, but her work largely ignored until the conditions were changes. We have also seen various branches of the management science theory which provide the rigorous quantitative techniques that provide the managers with a more control over their organizational utilization of the resources to produce the goods and services. We have seen the importance of examining the organization's external environment became evident after the introduction of the open systems theory and contingency theories during the 1960s. The focus of the contemporary management research is to find out the methods to help the managers improve the way they use organizations' resources and compete successfully in the global environment. We need to understand that the strategic management and total quality management, they are the two important strategies intended to enhance managers' ability to utilize organizations' resources. We have tried to understand all the theories of management and the relevance of this theory in the present scenario. As a manager, you should try to understand which is more relevant in your organization, and accordingly you can take the steps in your organization. I hope you are clear with all the fundamentals of the management theories, and I hope you like the session. Thank you.